Hi, my name is Hannah.
And my name is Addi, and we're the hosts of the podcast His Will Your Life.
Our podcast aims to share a Christian perspective about the issues facing our world today.
Today's episode will be about abortion.
Similar to the last episode, this episode will be separated into a few parts: the past, present, and some statistics about abortion. I'm going to start with the history of abortion within the U.S. There's obviously abortions in every area of the world. Just for today's purposes, we're going to focus on the U.S. So starting in 1829, New York State criminalizes abortions. Pre-quickening abortions were considered a misdemeanor. Post-quickening abortions were also a felony. Quickening refers to the first time the woman can feel the fetus move, which usually occurs around 4 months into the pregnancy. Between 1836 and 1840, Madame Restell begins providing abortion services in New York after it had become illegal. 1845, New York passes a statute that said women who had abortions could serve anywhere between 3 months to a year in prison. Selling medication to induce abortions was also deemed illegal at this time. If a woman sought an abortion, she was fined up to $1,000, which today would be over $26,000 with inflation. This law cites the story of Mary Rogers as one of its justifications, and there's tons of articles about her. It's a long story, so we're not going to share it today, but I encourage anybody to read that. In 1857, the American Medical Association begins a campaign to end all abortion. This campaign targeted, above all others, Madame Restell in New York. A few years later, 1872, New York State passes a law that says anyone who performs an abortion can serve between 4 and 20 years in prison. The next year, 1873, the Comstock Act is passed in the U.S. This prevented the distribution through the U.S. Postal Service any information about abortion, contraceptives, and abortion medication. So prior to this, they could send out mail advertising it. This was no longer allowed under the Comstock Act. In 1970, almost 100 years later, New York State legalizes abortions up until the 24th week of pregnancy. The only requirement is that the procedure had to be performed by a licensed physician at an accredited hospital. You can just go get it done anywhere. The next year, 1971, New York State repealed the statute that said inducing an abortion was a criminal offense. 1973, Roe v. Wade, a landmark decision of the U.S. Supreme Court, in which the court ruled that the Constitution of the United States protects against a woman's liberty to choose to have an abortion without excessive government restriction. And really not much has changed since Roe v. Wade, unfortunately. And then 2019, the Reproductive Health Act passed in New York State, allowing for abortions past the 24th week, if the mother's health or life is in danger or if the fetus isn't viable. It also allowed for qualified health practitioners to perform abortions, not just licensed medical doctors. And then May of this year, May of 2021, Texas Governor Abbott signs a law to prohibit abortions as early as 6 weeks, known as the Texas Heartbeat Act, which is now a law. It allows any person to sue someone who provides or performs an abortion once cardiac activity in an embryo can be detected.
I find it interesting that New York is the leading person in deciding about what happens in abortions according to the history of it. I mean, personally, we all learn about abortion at an age, like death and everything else is part of life. I know my learning of abortion was from watching Dirty Dancing when I was little, which probably is not the way to learn about abortion. Just gonna say that was very confusing for me. But I find it very interesting that New York was the leader in that movement particularly, not now that Texas is taking over, what's going to be New York's response to that?
Exactly. That was one thing that was really surprising as I was doing this research. I was like, at first I thought I clicked on something that was just New York, and I looked and it was like the United States history, and it was definitely not what I was expecting, that for them to be kind of the forerunners of the whole movement.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I didn't actually know about before the 1920s, I want to say. Like, my education of abortion before this was Margaret Sanger, and Planned Parenthood and the whole starting of that. That was how I thought abortion started, but it's very interesting to learn that it started back in, what did you say, 1800s?
Yes. Which
Yeah,
obviously they've been around before that, just that's when the law started getting brought into it.
yeah. I wonder how they did it, like, back in the Greek days, as sick as that is to say. It's just, if this is only when it started getting legalized, you know, we barely had medicine properly introduced in the 1800s, let alone if it existed before then, how bad that would have been, not only for the fetus, but also for the mother as well.
Exactly. Yeah. I tried to find some things and I couldn't find anything. Like, I obviously you can Google it and find things. I just couldn't really find anything that went with kind of today because everything has changed so much.
Yeah, so I'll be giving the present, what's currently going on version of what's happening. My resources were from a BBC article, and also I looked at Planned Parenthood in an article that they produced, because why not get one from the person we're not supposed to listen to? So I'm going to be quoting the article exactly because the way they explained it was very smart, and I cannot put it into better words. So, on the 1st of September, Texas passed the heartbeat law, which banned abortions after 6 weeks. And that has come into effect into only the U.S. state of Texas. It bans abortions, as Hannah said, after the detection of what anti-abortion campaigners call a fetal heartbeat, which is something medical authorities say is misleading. It's a heartbeat. I don't know how that can be misleading, but okay. The law, one of the most restrictive in the country, took effect after the Supreme Court did not respond to an emergency appeal by abortion providers. Doctors and women's rights groups have heavily criticized the law. It gives any individual the right to sue doctors who perform an abortion past the 6-week point. The so-called Heartbeat Act was signed into law by, as Hannah said, Texas Governor Greg Abbott in May. And since the 1973 Supreme Court decision in Roe versus Wade, U.S. women have held the right to an abortion until a fetus is viable, that is, able to survive outside the womb. This is usually between 22 and 24 weeks into the pregnancy. The so-called Texas Heartbeat Act prohibits abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy, at which point many women don't even know they're pregnant. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists said that the term heartbeat is misleading, and that was being detected at the stage is a portion of the fetal tissue that will become the heart as the embryo develops. Okay, let's just take a pause right there. Scientifically, if there is a child in the womb, they are not tissue. They are a fetus. If something is detected, it's not tissue. It's an actual heartbeat. I mean, the question to ask at that point is, if any tissue is making any movement, can that be considered a heartbeat? Like, it doesn't make sense. If there's a heartbeat, there's a heartbeat. You know, a tissue can't make a heartbeat. Anyway, that was my little spiel. The Texas law authorized a private civil right of action, which allows people to sue to enforce the law even if they themselves have not been harmed. And the two choices people have when going on this topic is pro-life, which the prefix means pro, which means in favor of, and the term life means in favor of life. The other choice is pro-choice, which means you're in the favor of having a choice of whether you should have an abortion or not. So that's pretty much where we are today. I think the Supreme Court, from what I've heard lately, has been taking another look into the heartbeat law to see if it's, you know, actually a good law. I think it's a very subjective law, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. As someone in California, there has been a lot of backlash here about the heartbeat law. And it's awful to have to watch people say that a heartbeat doesn't make somebody a human, because that's exactly what it does. If an older person's heart stops beating, everybody mourns and stuff. Why is it any different for a child in the womb? It's just...
Yeah, it's exactly right. And I mean, one of the people who I will always bring up in the topic of abortion is Kent Hovind, who is a very good evangelist, Christian evangelist, who makes a lot of scientific points. If you have a chance, go watch him. Very smart guy, even though He did make some mistakes later on in life, but we all get off the path sometimes. But what Kent Hovind specifically said in one of his videos is, if a person decides, well, I'm just annoyed with my 4-year-old Jimmy today, I'm just going to abort him. The next day comes to class, well, where's little Jimmy? Oh, his mother got tired of his antics, so she decided to abort him. That would be murder. But when a person does that to a baby in the womb, that's not considered murder, just because that child isn't able to live on their own. And there have been plenty of cases where children can live outside of the womb before 22 weeks. Not all of them just die when they come out of the womb. Some of them do live and become very good human beings and everything. So I think just putting a time limit on a life isn't the right thing to do to that life. I mean, what if somebody aborted one of the best presidents of our generation? We could have done that.
Definitely.
It's really sad.
And like you said, not every child becomes viable at the same time. There have been kids who have come out way too early and made it. And some of them don't. But you can't group every child into a 2-week time frame to say whether their life matters or not. And then another thing, kind of like what you said, one thing that I've always considered is a lot of times when a pregnant woman is murdered, they try it as a double homicide.
Mm-hmm.
So why is abortion any different than that?
Yeah, it's true. It's absolutely true. It's a very good point to make. From the law side, if that's considered a double homicide, how come this isn't considered murder? Because it is. At the end of the day, you're taking a life away.
Yeah, exactly. So I have some statistics. One of the first ones that I want to mention is Worldometer has a live abortion count on their website. It's for the year, so it resets every January 1st at midnight. When we started filming, it was at 30,784,250, and it's gone up since then. It's heartbreaking. It almost just looks like it's counting seconds. Some other things that I wanted to talk about, just abortion-wise, every year in the world, there's an estimated 40 to 50 million abortions. This corresponds to approximately 125,000 abortions per day. I think you mentioned Live Action earlier. They're a great pro-life source. So these next statistics are from them. 2,363 preborn children will die in America today. Every 97 seconds, Planned Parenthood aborts a child. Since 1973, with the Roe v. Wade decision, over 60 million American lives have been lost to abortion. And as Live Action put it, it's the gravest mass human rights abuse of our time. The entire makeup of the human being is formed at fertilization, not at implantation or 22 weeks. At fertilization. Another thing that they said that I couldn't word any better is, the right to liberty doesn't give us license to harm other human beings. One other thing that Live Action focuses on is the effects on women after they have an abortion. So some of the hidden effects of women after they have an abortion. These women are 81% more likely to experience mental health problems, 34% more likely to experience anxiety, 37% more likely to experience depression, 110% more likely to use or abuse alcohol, 230% more likely to use or abuse marijuana, and 155% more likely to experience suicidal behavior. According to First Choice Pro, 1 in 4 women have had an abortion, and only 1.5% of abortions are due to rape and incest, which is, from the pro-choice people that I've encountered, that's one of their biggest arguments. But to realize that so little of them are caused by that weakens their arguments tremendously. In 2015 alone, approximately 35% of all pregnancies in New York City ended in abortion, according to the CDC. For African American women in NYC, more abortions happen than babies are born. As of 2019, New York abortion law now allows for abortions all the way up to full term. And there are nearly 1 million reported abortions averaged yearly. And there are many, many more that are not reported. Planned Parenthood, as we've discussed, is the nation's largest abortion provider. And kind of going back to the heartbeat law, a child's heartbeat begins at 21 days, but it doesn't become audible until the 8 to 10 weeks. The CDC also began abortion surveillance in 1969 in order to document the number and characteristics of women obtaining legally induced abortions. Again, not including the ones who don't report them or don't get them legally. The CDC only compiles information on legal induced abortions, and states and areas are not required to report their abortion statistics. So what the CDC has probably isn't anywhere near accurate. This report for the CDC is used for many purposes in the field of public health, including to identify characteristics of women who are at high risk of unintended pregnancy, evaluate the success of programs aimed at preventing unintended pregnancies, calculate pregnancy rates on the basis of the number of pregnancies ending in abortion in conjunction with birth data and pregnancy loss estimates. Also, to monitor changes in clinical practice patterns related to abortion, such as changes in the types of procedures used and the weeks of gestations at the time of abortion. The last thing they use this report for is to calculate the national legal induced abortion case fatality rate. Some statistics from the CDC's abortion surveillance in 2018. In 2018 alone, 619,591 legal induced abortions were reported to the CDC from 49 reporting areas. Among 48 reporting areas with data each year during 2009 to 2018, in 2018, a total of 614,820 abortions were reported. The abortion rate was 11.3 abortions per 1,000 women aged 15 to 44 years, and the abortion rate was 189 abortions per 1,000 live births. From 2009 to 2018, the number, rate, and ratio of reported abortions decreased 22%, 24%, and 16% respectively. In 2017, the total number, rate, and ratio of reported abortions decreased to historic lows for the period of analysis for all three measures. However, compared with 2017 and 2018, the total number and rate of reported abortions increased by 1% and the abortion ratio increased by 2%. This is the last point on the surveillance from 2018. Similar to previous years in 2018, women in their 20s accounted for the majority of abortions at 57.7%. The majority of abortions in 2018 took place early in gestation. 92.2% of abortions were performed at less than 13 weeks. A smaller number of abortions at 6.9% were performed between 14 and 20 weeks, and even fewer at 1% were performed at more than 21 weeks. Early medical abortion is defined as the administration of medication to induce an abortion at less than 9 completed weeks, consistent with the current U.S. FDA. Labeling for, probably not going to pronounce this medication right, mifepristone, which was implemented in 2016. In 2018, 38.6% of all abortions were early medical abortions. Use of early medical abortion increased 9% from 2017 to 2018 and 120% from 2009 to 2018. I know that was a lot of information, but just there's so much about abortion because unfortunately there are so many.
Yeah, and it's disturbing. The way to just put abortion is it is a legalized genocide. That is abortion. It is a legalized genocide. You are killing off a generation of children, and it's completely legal, which is very disturbing and scary to me, at least. I don't know about any of you out there, but share your perspectives of that in the comments. So now that Hannah shared some of the statistics, I will share some of the solutions that could be a possible good thing to do instead of abort your child. So the first one is very obvious, and that is abstination. Don't have sex. If you don't want a child, don't have sex. It's that simple. Don't do it. You know, as a Christian, that's something, you know, you should be doing already. because it's better for you, it's better for the child, and eventually it will be better for your marriage because that's something you and your husband could share and it can be very intimate. The next option, which I think is a very good option, is adoption. That is a very, very good option because a lot of people want a child and are not able to have a child. So if you can give up the child you don't want to somebody who really, truly wants that child, you won't be giving a gift to them only. You'll also be giving a gift to you. Because even though you didn't want this child, you're giving somebody else this beautiful miracle of life that can do so much good in the future. And the third option, which a lot of people don't want to do, but it's a very good option, is keep the child. You know, a child is a very precious part of life, and it can do so much good. That the child, I'm not going to refer to a person as it, because that's not what you're supposed to do. So I'll stop doing that, and I apologize for doing that previously. But a child is a very big blessing in life, and it can bring so much good not only into your life, but into the world as well. You know, if you have a child and you have a really good family and a really good support system, that child will grow up in a beautiful home and become a very good person that will benefit society. So just consider those three options before you do have an abortion, because you're not only changing your life, you're changing this child's life and possibly somebody else's life.
Yeah, all of those are great options. Definitely consider everything before you get an abortion. Don't just find out that you're pregnant and say, oh, I don't want it. And because I feel like that's what a lot of people, especially the younger ones, do. They find out, and I know probably the younger you are, the scareder you get when it happens, and just kind of rush into it. Just take some time, consider your options, and do what's best, which is not abortion.
Yeah, and also Hannah only mentioned the mental aspect of health that happens to mothers after they've had an abortion, but we didn't bring into fact the physical things that happen when a woman has an abortion, which we aren't going to bring up because they are even more disturbing than abortion itself. It is very scary what happens to a woman who has abortion and what happens to the child. So just consider all of your options. If you are considering abortion, look at other options first before you go for that, because you're hurting yourself, possibly. You're definitely hurting alive. You're killing somebody. So that's a big thing to take into consideration. And also, you're going to have to take into consideration how you're going to feel afterwards. You're going to have to carry that guilt with you for life, that you were the person that took somebody who could have been a wonderful person and could have done so much good for the world. And I know the opposite way to think of that is, well, what if they had become a criminal or something, you know, along that lines? Well, then that's kind of your fault for the way you raised them. You know, you have to look at both sides of the spectrum and think about things before you do them. Don't let yourself be pushed to a direction. Take your time and think about it, because that's what you have. You have time.
And it can be very hard to watch, but live action has animated videos of how abortions are performed. And even if you're just interested in what it is, if you're not considering it, I'd encourage you to watch it. It's, like I said, very hard to watch. It's heartbreaking, but it sheds a lot of light on what exactly abortion entails.
Yeah, absolutely. Live Action is a wonderful organization to keep yourself educated as well about the topic. So I believe Hannah has some verses she might want to share. I know I have some verses to share about this. So would you like to go first, Hannah?
Yes, I will. So my first one is Jeremiah 1:5, which says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." Then my second one is Proverbs 6:16-19. "There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush into evil, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community."
Yeah, that's a very good verse. And Jeremiah 1:5 is wonderful. I actually have a painting of it up on my wall over there, and I see it every night before I go to bed. So I definitely suggest those two verses as well. The two I chose are ones I've used in papers I've written about abortion, so they're very good options also to read and think about. My first one that I chose was Psalm 139:13-16, which states, "For you created my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." My second one I chose to share with everyone was Isaiah 49:15. "Can a mother forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion on the child she has born? Though she may forget, I will not forget you."
Both very good verses. Obviously, we hear the Psalms, verses 13 and 14. I feel like a lot of people just kind of stop there and don't read further. And then Isaiah, it's great. You can't forget a baby. Even if you don't see it, you're never going to forget that you had a kid.
Yeah, absolutely, because you are tied to that child once you've had it. So definitely think about that. Thank you very much for joining us today as we discussed about abortion.
And keep tuned, because next week we will be discussing abuse.
We send our thoughts and prayers out to all of you, and remember to press that like and subscribe button.
And we'll see you next time on
His will, your life.